Imagine you've been blindfolded, your ears are muffled, and you've been guided into a vehicle that begins moving before you have time to process what is happening. You're being taken somewhere, but you don't have the faintest idea where that might be. This was the beginning of a real television experiment, broadcasted to millions, and the man inside had no idea. Your senses are almost completely muted. You can't see, you can barely hear, and all you're left with is the gentle sway of the vehicle beneath you and the icy chill of the window pressed against your skin. Then, suddenly, the movement stops. A hand grips yours and pulls you forward, out into the freezing air that bites immediately before guiding you indoors once again. You're led into a room and told to remove your blindfold and earmuffs. Slowly, you take in your surroundings. You're standing in a tiny, colourless apartment. Frosted windows line one end of the room, letting in light but offering no view of the outside world. The first thing that draws your attention is a rack filled with brightly coloured magazines. Their covers are almost jarring against the dullness of the space. Beyond that sits a small kitchenette, a portable gas stove, a sink, and a cramped bathroom tucked away beside it. To your right, a low table rests on the floor, holding a neat stack of blank postcards, a single pen, a telephone, a radio, a notebook, and a thin cushion. That's everything. Then, you're told to remove your clothes. At first, you don't understand. You hesitate, confused by the request, but the situation has already stripped you of any sense of control. So, you comply. You strip down to your underwear. They tell you that isn't enough. You're instructed to keep going, to remove the rest until there's nothing left on your body. Apprehensively, you do as you're told. They take your clothes, turn away, and leave you standing there. You ask what they're trying to do to you, but instead of an answer, they ask you a question. Can one live only on winning prizes? The door closes, your clothes are gone, and you're left alone in a tiny apartment, naked, confused, and completely unaware of the ordeal that is about to unfold. By the time this was over, more than 17 million people would all be watching him at once. The question posed to him wasn't hypothetical. This wasn't some abstract thought experiment designed to unsettle him. This was a real challenge created by a producer for a television show called Susunu Denpa Shonen, which loosely translates to "Do not proceed, crazy youth." In 1998, an aspiring comedian named Tomoaki Hamatsu, known to viewers as Nasubi, believed he was attending a routine audition. The project he was auditioning himself for was top secret, but for Nasubi, that didn't matter. For him, the audition felt like an opportunity to finally break through in Japan's crowded entertainment industry. The man running the audition was Toshio Tsuchiya, a highly successful television producer with a reputation for pushing contestants to their absolute limits in the name of entertainment. In previous experiments, Tsuchiya's contestants were forced to survive on an uninhabited island with no food, telling them their only way to escape was to build a raft. Others were sent hitchhiking across Africa and Europe with nothing but the clothes they wore. So when Nasubi walked into that audition, he assumed this would be difficult. But what he didn't realize was that he wasn't being cast for a role at all. He was the experiment. Ironically, the audition itself had been a game of luck. A box was placed in front of the contestants. Inside it were slips of paper. Draw the single winning slip and you would become the star of Toshio Tsuchiya's new show. Against the odds, Nasubi reached inside and pulled the winning slip. In that moment, it felt like all of his luck had paid off at once, because after that, there wouldn't be much left. Shortly after winning, Nasubi would be guided outside of the building to a vehicle where he was given a blindfold and earmuffs to wear. Tsuchiya led Nasubi into a small apartment, the same room you saw earlier. He was instructed to remove his clothes, and then he was left alone with nothing but the stacks of magazines. If Nasubi refused the conditions, the raffle would be redrawn, and he would lose his opportunity to be on TV. From that moment onwards, his genitals would be covered by a virtual picture of an eggplant. The producers would censor his nudity in real time, manually, 24/7 to follow his body. Only after the conditions were met, the challenge would be then explained to him. If Nasubi wanted food, clothing, or basic necessities, he would have to win them. Inside the magazines were mail-in sweepstakes, competitions where you filled out postcards, mailed them away, and hoped, days or weeks later, that something would arrive. Every postcard he filled was sent by the production team, as he was not allowed to leave the apartment. Every day without a win was a day spent cold and hungry. The challenge would only end once the total value of his winnings reached 1 million yen, roughly $7,000 at the time, with the buying power of roughly $14,000 today. What Nasubi didn't know was that from the moment that he stepped inside that tiny room, he was being broadcast to millions of viewers across Japan. Nasubi began the challenge with a lot of enthusiasm. With nothing else to do, he would fill out thousands of the postcards, convinced that the persistence would eventually pay off. It took days for Nasubi to score his first win. He would be completely elated when he received his prize of 12 jelly drinks. A few days later, cracks in his sanity started to appear. Nasubi would attempt to perform a handstand without any success, puncturing a hole in the wall in the process. His hunger quickly became a constant. Days would pass before he heard another knock at the door. Thinking he had finally won a prize, Nasubi would be left devastated to realize that the delivery driver had mistakenly knocked on the wrong door with an order of ramen and stir-fried vegetables. Nasubi's second victory would come sometime later, winning a 5-kilogram bag of rice, but relief would quickly turn into another problem. He had no utensils to cook it with. Out of desperation, he tried eating the rice raw, but quickly gave up. He thought long and hard how to make the rice edible until he began to innovate. He began repurposing the empty jelly containers from his first win, filling them with rice and hot water from the tap in the kitchenette, leaving them overnight to soften. However, his experiment failed. He slowly figured out ways to cook the rice with the discarded containers and the small portable gas stove provided to him. Piece by piece, human adaptability kicked in, and he learned how to survive with the items that he'd won. Pens became chopsticks, tins became cooking pots. Every small innovation was born from literal hunger. The prizes he'd received were often irrelevant to his needs. He won women's underwear that didn't fit him, a vacuum cleaner, a bike, and other random household items that he couldn't use. Eventually, he won a stuffed sea lion which he named Venus. He spoke to it and walked around the room, treating it like a companion to fill the silence and the monotony. Viewers watched as his humor slowly faded, replaced by loneliness and visible mental strain. After 335 days, nearly a year in isolation, Nasubi finally reached his goal of 1 million yen. It was finally over, or so he thought. Instead of his freedom, Nasubi was flown to Korea to celebrate his victory. At first, it felt like a reward. He was given lavish meals and a chance to rest, but his relief didn't last long. Soon, he was placed into another empty room and given a new challenge. They asked him, "Can someone survive in Korea using only prize winnings?" Nasubi sunk his head low. This time, he was tasked with winning enough prizes to the value of a plane ticket back home to Japan, valued at 46,900 yen. All of this he had to do in Korean, which Nasubi didn't speak or write. Again, Nasubi could have said no, but it was still kept in the dark about the true entertainment hit that he had become on national television. He got to work and was able to raise the funds for an economy class ticket in 2 months. But that was too quick for the producers, and the goalposts were moved. The challenge was updated so that Nasubi was now required to win an additional 9,500 yen to upgrade his ticket to business class. And then again, once this goal was reached, it required him to win enough to cover the cost of a first-class ticket valued at 81,600 yen. As Nasubi's time on Susunu Denpa Shonen dragged on, the show worked towards the ultimate reveal. About 4 months later, Nasubi had earned enough prize winnings to cover his first-class plane ticket back to Japan. After nearly 15 months, the producers prepared the final reveal. On the day of his revelation, Nasubi was again blindfolded and guided to a room identical to the ones that he had been living in for over a year. At this point, Nasubi instinctively removed his clothes and sat at the table. When the reveal finally arrived, the walls of Nasubi's room fell down, exposing a naked, broken man sitting on the stage of a television studio filled with hundreds of people simultaneously applauding and laughing at him. As two TV presenters approached the stunned Nasubi, he simply asked, "Why are they laughing?" For 15 months, Nasubi believed he was being filmed for a future broadcast. He had no idea that his ordeal was being broadcast to millions of viewers on Nippon TV and eventually streamed online 24/7. The show became one of Japan's most talked about television phenomena. It was praised by some as groundbreaking entertainment and condemned by others as a deeply unethical experiment. When the cameras finally stopped, Nasubi faced a new challenge: returning to normal life. Nasubi has spoken about his difficulty readjusting to society, noting that simple social interactions felt foreign and even frightening after nearly a year and a half alone. Years later, he would speak openly about the psychological toll of isolation and the strange reality of becoming famous through suffering. In time, he began to reshape his experience into something meaningful, working to help others managing social isolation, and became an advocate for mental health. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he used his own story of extreme isolation to help others cope with loneliness. Today, Nasubi's story remains one of the most controversial chapters in reality television history, a story about ambition, endurance, and entertainment pushed to its absolute limits. With time, support, and distance from the cameras, Nasubi has slowly reclaimed his dignity, his identity, and a life that once felt impossibly out of reach.